Hi. The keys of the new Osmose CE may look like irregular MIDI controllers, but they actually have way more sensors and expressive control. Each key can detect pressure from the moment it's pressed and throughout a large range of motion, and detect left and right motion for pitch bends and vibrato. The keyboard also lets you create a controlled slide between two notes by gradually transitioning pressure from one key to the other. It also has a built-in arpeggiator that lets you dynamically control the timbre, pitch, and playback articulation of each note individually. 3 years ago, Expressive-E released Osmose, a synth that combines their keybed technology with Haken Audio's Eaganmatrix-based synth. And now comes Osmose CE, a relatively lower-cost MIDI controller-only version. Without the built-in hardware synth engine, but bundled with software that includes over 900 presets designed with Osmose CE in mind, based on various free and paid software synth engines including Vital, Phaseplant, Dune 3, and more. They also added transport and device control integration with a few popular DAWs. In this video, I'll take a look at it in detail and cover pros and cons compared to the competition. Before I start, a quick disclosure. Expressive-E sent me Osmose CE. Other than that, no money changed hands. They have no say over the content of this video and don't get to see it before it's published. Okay, let's dive right in. Osmose CE is a MIDI controller, meaning that unlike its bigger brother, the Osmose Synth, it doesn't make any sounds on its own. Rather, you need to hook it up to a hardware or software synth. Now, while it may look like a traditional piano-style MIDI controller, or at least the front part, there are a few important differences. First, the total travel of the white keys is around 20 millimeters, or almost an inch, as opposed to most keybeds, where it's about half that. Black keys travel less, but still, quite a bit. Around over 1 centimeter. The second important difference is that whereas regular keybeds only produce a single velocity value when you press a key, and then in rare cases have a few millimeters of travel on the bottom for aftertouch or pressure control, Osmose CE tracks your finger location throughout the travel of the key, starting from about a millimeter from the top, depending on how sensitive you set it to be, and then generates continuous MIDI control values throughout its travel. One important note about the travel of the keys, resistance is lighter in the top half compared to the bottom half. So it kind of feels like you're hitting something somewhat solid midway, though without the kind of bounce you get on regular keybeds. And Osmose maps these two ranges to two different continuous parameters. By default, the first half is mapped to MIDI MPE channel pressure, and then the second part of the travel controls MPE slide or CC74. But if you want to break out of the MPE standard, you can map both pressure, the first half, and aftertouch, the second half, to any number of different destinations, CCs, and even pitch bend. And same goes for aftertouch. Then besides the up and down articulation, the keys also move to the left and to the right a couple of millimeters in both directions. This motion is fixed to bend pitch. By default, it's set to 1 semitone, but if you want to take it to an extreme, you can. Or even beyond that. Or even less than a semitone if you want to be very delicate. This works great when soloing. However, when playing chords, it's actually hard to dig into a chord without moving the pitch left or right a bit, which can be an interesting effect. If you like, you can change the pitch bend sensitivity to taste. Or cancel it altogether if it bothers you when playing chords. So those are the hardcore physical sensors built into Osmose CE. There are a few gestures these continuous controls enable with a bit of clever software. One of the more interesting ones is pressure glides. Most synths have a static glide or portamento with a glide rate hidden in a menu somewhere. On Osmose, with pressure glide enabled, it works differently based on the relative pressure you apply between the original note and the destination note. As long as they're within a maximum distance which you determine in the menu. So for example, I could do this within an octave range and play polyphonically. As long as I keep the two notes apart beyond the distance I set. So for example, if I keep this at the default octave, then I can't play chords. Within an octave, all I'll get is one note based on the relative pressure of whatever I pressed. So you can set this based on the style or distance or whatever you want to achieve so that you can both play chords and glide to taste. One note about this: to complete the glide, you need to fully release the original note. So just be aware of that. Another interesting algorithmic use of Osmose's keybed sensitivity is its arpeggiator, which is the second available playstyle in addition to pressure glide. A few things are interesting about the arpeggiator. First, as expected, you control the timbre of each note separately and its pitch. But more interestingly, you can assign its expression parameters to various arpeggiator destinations. So for example, I could assign pressure, which is the first part of the motion, to gate time, swing, or ratchets, which is an interesting performance option. But I think even more compelling is to point pressure or aftertouch to octave transpose, letting us control both the timbre and the pattern in real time. And with the arpeggiator, besides pressure and aftertouch, pitch bend is also an assignable parameter. So let's say assign pitch bend right 2 octaves. Where's that at? Let's go for an octave or 2. So in this case, shifting the key to the right will not only change its pitch, but also add octaves to the arc pattern. If you created something you like, you can always save it as a preset, and a few factory patterns are included. Let's just briefly listen to a few of these. Then beside that, you've got the usual suspect arpeggiator parameters. So you've got different pattern directions, time divisions, gate, swing, octave ranges, ratchets. And I think these control the rate of parameter changes. You can quickly turn the ARP on or off, by the way, with this button. And then to round out the expression abilities of this keybed, it also detects velocity, as you'd expect, both key on and key off velocity. Okay, so those are the basics of the keybed and surrounding technology. Before we take a look at the bundled software package and working with other hardware and software synths, let's just take a look at what we have besides the keybed. Osmose CE has an all-metal build and is fairly heavy. If it drops on the floor, I'd worry about the floor as much as I would about the controller. Overall, I like this new smoother enclosure style much more than the sharper edges of the original Osmose. The hardware and keybed overall feel premium except for the encoders, which are wobbly, and the interface response time, which is often laggy. The encoders to the left of the screen are detent encoders, so they work well for selecting items from lists. The ones at the bottom are smooth encoders, so it's a bit more of a challenge to select items from lists. And when controlling continuous parameters, they work well, but it's a bit hard to get a feel for how their motion relates to controlling a parameter. It's not unusable by any means, just not as good as endless encoders I've seen on other devices. The screen itself, by the way, is bright and crisp. The dark gray labels are a bit hard to see from an angle, but that can easily be fixed with a different color choice. The screen menu hierarchy takes a bit of getting used to, but overall, M is kind of like the main menu button, and this will toggle between the main modes you've got access to, in this case, external MIDI control and DAW control. There's also a general settings menu over here. Anyway, once you're in one of the two main modes, you can tab between different tabs using the buttons on top. Then the top left encoder moves between submenus or subtabs. And then if you've got more than 4 parameters on the bottom, then this encoder scrolls left and right to show you more parameters. Then the bottom 4 encoders change the values of whatever parameter that's above them. Going back up to the main menu, if you enter DAW control mode, then the M button toggles between controlling the current device on the track or the CTRL-E software and generic DAW controls. And then to add to the M button's responsibility, it also acts as a shift function for various items that are labeled either on the panel or when you press it on screen. In DAW control mode, by the way, these buttons are transport buttons and control the metronome. There's also a main volume control knob. Don't let this confuse you. There's no synth in here. It controls the master volume of your DAW. These are pitch and mod controls. They're not wheels, they're faders, but pitch bounces. These buttons select presets. Takes maybe a few seconds to swap presets. If you need faster preset swapping, you can just put multiple synths on multiple tracks in your DAW. We'll talk about navigating through the CTRL-E software in a bit. In terms of connectivity, there are no audio outputs because this isn't a synth or an audio interface. You've got 2 USB jacks, one for MIDI and power and another just for power. I'm powering this currently directly from my MacBook Pro, but if your computer can't provide enough power, you can always use the second USB-C jack for that. Then you've got 5-pin MIDI DIN in and out, and 2 pedal jacks you can configure to accept either sustain or expression, which self-promotion alert work with +3 in case you want to add a drone mode and a fader to control one more parameter. One caveat though, at least as of the current firmware, many MPE presets in CTRL-E don't support the sustain pedal well, since a lot of their expression relies on pressure and aftertouch, which at least as of the current firmware aren't frozen when you press a sustain pedal. So sustain might hold a note, but it might be very quiet because pressure and aftertouch aren't saved when you press sustain. Hopefully this is something Expressive-E addresses in a future firmware update. Okay, let's move on and take a look at the CTRL-E software. This is a plugin that comes bundled with Osmose CE. We'll talk about connecting to other synths in a bit, but this is a great place to start because it's got over 900 sounds and presets that are tailored to CE's unique control capabilities. CTRL-E is currently available only as a plugin, so you'll need to use it within a DAW and only within a DAW that supports MPE. And don't forget to enable MPE for its track and instance, otherwise it won't work properly. CTRL-E works in a similar way to Analog Lab from Arturia in that it's not actually a synth on its own, but rather it's a container that includes multiple synth engines and presets for those engines. An important difference, though, is that these synths aren't just made by Expressive-E, but also by a number of other third-party companies, including the very capable Vital, Phaseplant, and more, including Expressive-E's Noisy, which is also great and has a few Osmose-specific functions. Like Analog Lab, you don't have access to all the parameters of the synth engine unless you own the specific synth, unless you have a license to it. If you don't have a license, you still get access to 8 parameters, 8 macro parameters, 4 at a time if you're using the macro controls on Osmose CE, or 8 on screen, and actually 16 if you want. But you need to own a copy to edit the synth parameters beyond that. Some of these synths are free, by the way. So Vital, for example, let's maybe load this preset, is a free synth you can download, and then if you press this button, you've got access to all the synth parameters as you'd expect. Zyklop is also free. I happen to own a copy of Faceplant, so we can see, its interface here as well. If you don't own the synth, like for example, I don't own a copy of June 3, then you can still play the preset and edit the macros, but if you go to the plugin page, you'll just see a generic image. Unlike Analog Lab, by the way, you can't add additional effects from within the plugin itself, and you can't create splits or layers from within the plugin, but you can, of course, do all those things within your DAW. A quick tour of the interface: you can filter presets by synth, or just see all the presets by type, subtype, and character. Once you've filtered things, the relevant presets show up here on the right. You can either select them with your mouse or move between presets using the next and previous buttons. You can also do all this filtering using the 4 encoders, as well as move for presets. If you want to select an item, just press it down. You can't see preset names here or categories or types here, which obviously is something I hope they add. You can favorite presets by pressing this button, and a long press moves you to a view where you only see favorites. You can also save changes to presets and then move between the factory banks and user banks. When you're using CTRL-E, these two tabs let you select presets or adjust macro parameters, as well as assign the mod wheel or the pedal jacks to your CC of choice. And then these two tabs or menus control sensitivity, like I showed you earlier, for the various aspects of the controller, and select the arpeggiator or pressure glide or none. By the way, currently, if you adjust controls to a specific preset, you can't save that along with the preset. Hopefully that's something they add. So that's pretty much it for the CTRL-E software. Let's take a look at DAW controls. In DAW control mode, these buttons control transport. This encoder lets you move the playhead around, or the loop start if you press it. And turning this encoder selects the different tracks in your project. You've got control over track levels, panning, and 2 sends. And pressing these mutes and solos tracks with shift, you've got undo, redo, quantize, loop length, scene change, and clip launch, and tempo, along with a tap tempo if you want. And if you're on a track that doesn't have CTRL-E on it and you press this button, you can edit device parameters. At least that's how it works in Ableton Live, and I think it does also in other DAWs. You can also hold shift to switch devices on your track, to switch control of devices. So now we're controlling the delay. While we're here, you've got the same gesture controls. And shift also lets you start and stop the arpeggiator and transpose the keybed. So that's the Ableton Live integration. I didn't test the others. Overall, they're similar, but there may be differences, so check the documentation if you use Logic, Cubase, or Bitwig. Okay, so that's how you control a DAW and Expressive Ease bundled plugin, but you can use Osmose CE to play any hardware or software synth, even if it's not a fancy MPE synth. You've got 4 factory modes, and you can customize these, but basically, if you choose Classic Keyboard, then you can play regular velocity-sensitive instruments. And this mode also has mono aftertouch, meaning that if you play a chord, then aftertouch will be applied equally to all its notes. Then the next step up is poly aftertouch for synths that support it. Then the next mode is MPE mode. In this mode, you get both aftertouch per key and MPE slide, or CC74, which kicks in for the second portion of the travel. Like I mentioned, you can customize these. And then finally, you've got multi-channel mode. Like MPE, this sends every note on a different channel. with two important differences. First, you can include channel 1 in the range, whereas in MPE it's excluded and acts as a main channel. But more importantly, global parameters like pitch bend and mod wheel get sent across all the channels in the range that you determine. And there are a bunch of creative ways you can use this. For example, you can hook up a few synths, each on their own channel in your DAW or in a hardware setup, and every new note you play can trigger a different synth on a round-robin basis. Another way to use this is to get MPE-like performances from non-MPE synths, as long as they're multi-timbral. Just use the same preset for all the channels based on the number of timbres you've got. Anyway, so those are the 4 factory presets. You can customize these, for example, to set channel ranges, like I mentioned earlier. So if you've only got a 4-timbre synth, you can round robin between 4 channels. If it's a mono channel synth, you can change the MIDI channel you're sending data to. And within MPE, channel 1 is always allocated as the master channel, but if it doesn't have 16-note polyphony, you might need to adjust the end channel based on its specs. We've already seen how you can assign the different jacks and mod wheel to different CCs, and the different ranges in the keys motion. So pressure and aftertouch can be assigned to any CC you like, for example. And then when controlling hardware synths, you can also customize pitch bend, velocity and pressure, and aftertouch. You've also got the same play modes, meaning both the arpeggiator and pressure glides. Okay, moving on. Last but not least, Osmose doesn't include an internal synth, and there's no upgrade path to get the Haken Audio Eaganmatrix in here, but I did try to hook up a Continuum Mini to this, and it worked quite nicely after tweaking a few settings, namely move from MP Plus to MPE, and set the pitch bend range from 96, which is the default, to 48. And it seems like expression works quite nicely. Including pressure glides. So while there's no official upgrade path, the two can still play nice. Okay, let's take a look at the pros and cons of Osmose CE. On the pros side, like the Osmose synth, now the CE is truly a revolution in the expression you can get out of a set of black and white keys. Now, it's not that you can't get expressive with regular black and white keyboards, but these keys give almost anything you play an extra expressive dimension, as long as the patch is adapted accordingly, in the way that regular keys just can't. Both when playing normally and when using the arpeggiator. Now, there are a growing number of instruments, controllers, and synths with various formats and shapes for expressive control, but Osmose is as good as it gets while sticking to the familiar black and white key form factor, while still letting you play in ways that normal keybeds just can't touch, if you don't mind the pun. You feel it most when you go back from Osmose to a regular keybed, like a whole range of expression has been taken away from you. Then beside that and the arpeggiator, pressure glide adds another dimension of expression, letting you make targeted slides in ways you just can't with regular pitch bend or portamento. The only thing that comes close to this so far is the keybed on Arturia's Polybrute 12, but that's not available as a MIDI controller without the synth, and it doesn't have the left-right wiggle pitch control. Then finally, on the pros side is the library of over 900 sounds tailored to Osmose CE based on multiple excellent software synth plugins that are all tightly integrated into the CTRL-E software, so you've got quite a lot to get going with. Those are the pros. On the cons side, when comparing this to other expressive controllers, you're giving up a couple of degrees of motion to get these familiar black and white keys. Other expressive synths and controllers like the Continuum, Sensel Morph, and Linstrument let you move along the X, Y, and Z axis almost entirely independently of each other, which isn't the case here. So for example, you can't slide up and down a key to change the timbre. That MPE slide is just the bottom portion of the key's motion. To access it, you first need to go through the entire pressure portion, get that to 100%, and only then do you have control over the Y or MPE slide parameter? Same goes for pitch. Yes, you've got these pitch bands, but you can't slide from one note to another without activating pressure glide, which is cool, but does have its set of limitations we discussed earlier. Then the second con is that there's no firm end and bounce to the motion, so playing Osmose is kind of like walking in sand as opposed to a firm sidewalk on a regular key bed. Personally, I don't think that's a big issue because I kind of got used to it and I'm not a fast player anyway, but if you are, it's something you should be aware of. Then beside that and a few bugs which I hope are just beta issues, I've got a few wishlist features, which you can view as cons because we don't know whether they'll be implemented or not. First, I'd love to see an onboard split option so that we can use the arpeggiator, say, on one side of the key bed while playing a bass or pads with another. Then the other issue is that the screen is quite laggy in certain cases, not always, but in certain cases. And the control curves of the knobs can be improved a lot. It just doesn't feel very natural. Also, when you're selecting presets, it would be great to see preset names on screen. And like I mentioned earlier, if you use a sustain pedal, it doesn't work as expected. I'd expect it to hold pressure and aftertouch values. Currently, a sustain pedal isn't usable in many of the presets. Finally, when you're controlling external synths in the regular external MIDI mode, it would be great to use the knobs as CC parameter controls with custom names and the ability to save presets. Currently, the knobs can only control synth parameters in DAW control mode. So that's it for Osmose CE. Stay tuned for me playing a few of its presets, and if you like the insights in this video, you'll find plenty more in my ever-expanding book of electronic music ideas, tips, and tricks. Hit like if this was useful, ring the YouTube bell below if you want to make sure you don't miss the next one. Thanks for watching.